Do all lives have value? Do all people, no matter what their nationality, do they have equal value? When you're talking about a war, does it matter what their nationality is, whether they have value or whether they don't? Now, of course, the whole world is all focused on the Middle East right now because of the horrific, barbaric attack by Hamas terrorists infiltrating into Israeli society and literally butchering unarmed, innocent civilians of Israeli origin throughout the entire area of Israel. Not to mention that they also fired a bunch of rockets on civilians and burned homes. The most barbaric thing you can imagine. Those civilians were going to concerts. They were resting in their homes. They were driving down the street on bicycles. I mean, the most heinous attack you can imagine. Now, that's going to naturally elicit a lot of anger among the Israeli people, and they're going to want justice for that heinous crime. They deserve justice. They absolutely deserve it. No one will call that into question. And even if someone did, the Israeli country would not listen to that. The question that does come in, though, is what's going to happen next. Now, so far, the Israeli response to this has been with a heavy dose of airstrikes throughout Gaza, allegedly to destroy their command and control centers and try to go after their senior leaders and destroy tunnels ahead of an expected ground invasion. That's what the Israeli government is saying. But the casualty that it's imposing upon this Palestinian civilians is going through the roof. Now, just a couple of days ago, former President Barack Obama published an article where he was warning we have to be careful about what we're doing. Gary, if you could pull up that my screen here, I'm going to read something off here. He's basically saying that what they're doing in Gaza, the Israelis could backfire if civilians aren't protected. And you scroll down here a little bit and you'll see that the key part of it is Obama called on people around the world to put our best values rather than our worst fears on display by rejecting anti-Semitism, anti-Muslim, anti-Arab, or anti-Palestinian sentiments in all forms. He said it was also necessary to reject the morally bankrupt suggestion that any cause can somehow justify the deliberate slaughter of innocent people and not to minimize the Hamas attack on Israel civilians or the Palestinian sufferings. And look, that is spot on. What he said is absolutely right. And it matters. It matters not just on the human morality of it, but it also matters for Israel's own needs. And because for them to actually continue to do this operation and to continue to punish Hamas because they are barricaded in, Gaza City under tunnels and in buildings and who knows where, it's going to be a very difficult process to go in and get them. The casualties that have already come are going to certainly go through the roof once Israel begins a ground incursion. For them to continue to do that, they have to maintain the support, especially of the United States population and of the larger Western world. But it's also important that they get Arab support, because if they go too far, if they're seen as not counting the Palestinian lives, then they could lose Arab support. Now, just to give you a little sense of what happens, because of with some comments I'm going to show you from Israel and America's best friend in the region, the country of Jordan, where the king and queen are highly respected around the world in both Israeli, Arab, and Western cultures. They truly are, among the most respected. So I'm going to show you something that they have been saying the last couple of days. But to set the stage, let me show you a bit of this NBC report on just what's happening in the Gaza Strip.
Medical workers say they aren't leaving, but they can't abandon the wounded, already flooding in. Our local camera crew visited the Shifa hospital in Gaza City and found it in a state of collapse. With all the beds full, patients are treated on the floor, sheets used for stretchers. Israel says it's only targeting Hamas. But there were wounded children everywhere. In some cases, even those trying to flee are attacked. Medical officials told us most of these victims, 200 of them, were injured by Israeli airstrikes as they were trying to escape Gaza City in a convoy, and that 70 were killed.
Now, President Biden was asked just about 2 hours ago at a press conference in the Rose Garden. He was asked about what Israel's doing and that the casualty count is just really going high and what he thought about that. Here's how the exchange happened.
Israeli forces have killed over 6,000 Palestinians, including 2,700 children. You've previously asked Netanyahu to minimize civilian casualties. Do these numbers say to you that he is ignoring that message?
What they say to me is I have no notion that the Palestinians are telling the truth about how many people are killed. I'm sure innocents have been killed, and it's the price of waging a war. I think we should be incredibly careful. I think not we, the Israelis should be incredibly careful to be sure that they're focusing on going after the folks that are propagating this war against Israel. And it's against their interest when that doesn't happen. But I have no confidence in the number that the Palestinians are using.
Even matter because of that NBC report you saw there. There is substantial suffering going on among the Palestinian side. Now, as I said, Jordan is one of the best friends in Israel's corner in the Middle East, and they have a lot of influence over. It's in Saudi Arabia to some extent, and in Egypt, and to the larger Arab population throughout the Middle East. A lot of them look to Jordan because they are able to kind of balance the two sides together. So what they say has mattered. Now, a few days ago at a Cairo peace conference, the king of Jordan, King Abdullah, said this.
Anywhere else attacking civilian infrastructure and deliberately starving an entire population of food, water, electricity, and basic necessities would be condemned. Accountability would be enforced immediately, unequivocally.
Now, again, he is one of the best friends of both the United States and Israel. And you see he's coming out pretty strongly in public against the Palestinian suffering that he's seeing as a result of the understandable and appropriate Israeli desire to punish the terrorists who murdered their civilians. But it does matter how you do it. Now, it got a little bit more personal with the Queen of Jordan, Queen Reina, who, again, is one of the most beloved figures really throughout the region, is really admired around the world as being a woman of elegance and grace and always caring about people. On a report on CNN, she had this to say.
Can I ask you this question then? Because quite a brave, I think she's Saudi anyway, a journalist on the Saudi television network Al Arabiya, took this and hammered Khalid Mashal, the former head of Hamas, and said to him, the butchery, well, that's my word, but she said what everybody's seen on their screens has turned the world away from the Palestinian cause. And just to expand, people are saying Hamas and what it did has brought this down on these poor people of Gaza. Do you accept that?
What people need to understand is that, yes, under the guise of the right to defend itself, we are witnessing atrocities. Every country has a right to defend itself, but not through any means, not through war crimes, not through collective punishment. 6,000 people, civilians killed so far, 2,400 children. How is that self-defense? We are seeing butchery at a mass scale using precision weapons. So for the past 2 weeks, we have seen the indiscriminate bombardment of Gaza. Entire families wiped out.
So we go back, circle around to the beginning of this, where former President Obama, wrote this article that says, hey, everybody needs to count. All the words he said there were right, and I agree with them. Here's the problem for the United States. That's not the only words he's ever said. And when he was in a position of power, he did something very different than what he's describing here. Now, I'm going to show you a bit of a press conference that he gave while he was president in August of 2016, talking about our actions in two big cities of Raqqa and Mosul.
And that's why, as we discussed today, we're going to keep going after ISIL aggressively across every front of this campaign. Our air campaign continues to hammer ISIL targets. More than 14,000 strikes so far, more than 100,000 sorties, including those hitting the ISIL core in Raqqa and in Mosul. And in stark contrast to ISIL, which uses civilians as human shields, America's armed forces will continue to do everything in our power to avoid civilian casualties.
Okay, that's almost verbatim the same thing that many Israeli leaders are saying. They're saying we're trying to limit civilian casualties. That's why we're trying to get the people out. We go in with targeted, surgical strikes, to go in with precision-guided weapons to minimize the civilian casualties. But you've seen with your own eyes how that's working out, and you see the numbers going up. Even if those numbers are exaggerated, let's just accept that they are of the Palestinian casualties. The number is huge, and the loss of life is extraordinary. And these people are as powerless as any group on the planet. They can't run. They can only squish further into the southern part of the city, and there's just nowhere for them to go. So it is important that they do be taken care of, because war is a horrible thing. I've been deployed into combat zones 4 times myself. I have seen it personal and up close, and it is heinous. It is horrible. My heart always bleeds for those who are caught in the middle. This is a really bad one because it's in the middle of a situation where they can't run, and the cost is going up, and their powerlessness and futility are just going through the roof. But if Israel wants to continue its operation to go after the legitimate target of Hamas, they're going to have to do something different. They cannot just go in and continue to wantonly go in there and destroy people and buildings at the rate they're going, because then they could lose support. Now, you see, for the United States, when you see Obama saying what makes so much sense on paper, but what do you think the impact that's going to have on the Israeli leaders when they saw that he made that same comment when he was president? And yet, look, let's take a look at what happened when President Obama is saying that we're using surgical strikes. This is what he meant. These are file footage from U.S. sources, from the U.S. military. The Pentagon, I believe, is where we got these. This is what we did in the cities of Mosul and Raqqa that he was talking about there. And you see, when you compare those strikes with what you see coming out of Israel right now, is there any difference? So the Israeli government sees that. They see what Obama's saying now, but they saw what he said in 2016. They saw what he did, and when he was taking care of civilian casualties. And then you see what happened. There was enormous number, thousands of civilians that were killed in both Mosul and in Raqqa, as the United States was supporting both the Syrian Democratic Forces and the Iraqi security forces to take care of those 2 cities, where we provided the air power, the things that you're seeing there. And there's no difference in what Israel is doing right now, although they're doing it on a slightly larger scale, but only slightly. The point being, for the United States, if we want to have influence in the world right now, so if Obama wants to have this influence, and I believe that he means every word he said. I think that he is also just sickened by the suffering that he sees among the Palestinian people and the Israeli people, and he wants all of them to get justice for what has happened. But when he has done this, and when we keep doing things like this, where we do one thing and then say another, it's just not it's going to undercut our ability to really influence people when it matters. Because look, we say the similar things against the Russians. We say that, you've been having targeted civilians on the Ukraine side, and you're blowing up some of their cities and their neighborhoods, and you're attacking civilians, and we condemn it, rightfully so. It's proper that we do that. But when they see, and people around the world see, and when our opponents see what we did in similar situations in 2016, and certainly all during the war on terror in Afghanistan, there's similar things that are going on there, then our ability to influence Russia, our ability to influence Israel is greatly diminished, if not taken off the table. That no one even listens to us. That's why I'm saying it is so important that we say and do what we mean. If we say our values are to protect civilian life, then it needs to be genuine. It needs to be consistent, and it needs to be demonstrated in action. Not only is it the right thing to do, and that's enough reason right out on the surface of it, but it's also practically necessary, because if we want to have influence in the future where our words can actually stop bad things from happening, if we want people to believe us, then we're going to have to change the way we act and the things that we say when it matters to our side. Now, those are the things that I wanted to point out today. And, I hope that Israel does these things for their own sake, for the sake of the Palestinian people, because they deserve to be taken care of. They deserve the same kind of protection that we give the Israeli civilians, because it was barbaric that they were attacked. But the innocent Palestinian people, innocent people anywhere, in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen, all of the people who were caught in the middle of wars deserve to be taken care of. And look, that means that the work will be harder for Israel. to actually take care of the people there, that means you'll have to use really precision guided munitions, and only when you have really good intelligence. And then when you go onto the ground, you have to have really sharp rules of engagement so you don't kill anybody unnecessarily. That's a lot harder. It takes a lot more time, and it almost always causes higher casualties on the soldiers. And that's a hard price to pay. But look, you have to do the right thing. You can't just say, well, I'm going to protect my soldiers by giving them loose rules of engagement so that many civilians are killed, because look, Obama's right. That could backfire, and it could come back to cause you even more harm, because if Israel loses its international support, if the Arab Street gets beyond some level of anger, then it turns into they start supporting the Palestinian side. And if, for example, in Hezbollah in the north, we've talked about many times, then that could really harm Israeli security. So this is just a bigger issue than just, oh, you're a bleeding heart and all you care about these people at the expense of getting justice. No, absolutely not. I care a great deal about Israel. I care a great deal about their civilian population that was terrorized and brutalized, but I want them to do something that's going to work for them, something that's going to help them in the long run, that will actually enable them to at some point get to a place where they can live in peace, as well as the Palestinian people, who likewise deserve the chance to just live in peace. And it's going to be a long, long path. It's going to get a lot uglier before it gets better, but I hope and I pray that the leaders of all these different organizations will finally start doing the right thing and prioritizing the lives of those civilians who have no power around them, because otherwise this is going to be a really bad situation for the whole world, and I do not want to see it deteriorate even further. Thanks very much. That's all we have for you on Deep Dive today. We'll see you next time.